do anything, not everything. The whole idea about this is looking at what are the different elements of burnout that you might be struggling with and what to do about it. And what are the things that you might be in your blind spots? What are the things you're not paying attention to that can help? So today, the topic is 5 strategies to help you cope with emotional causes of burnout. Um, it's going to be an interesting topic because I think one of the things I've noticed is when it comes to burnout, the first thing that usually talk about is productivity. It's like, okay, this is my sign of burnout. And so a lot of the solutions tend to be around how can you get your efficiency levels up, which is cool, right? So that's fine. That's one way of looking at it. But what I've also seen is that when it comes to burnout, that's not the only thing. So in previous sessions, we've talked about different of different elements of burnout, which is going to be physical, mental, emotional, sometimes even spiritual, right? Financial could be an element of it as well, social. And so when people just talk about the productivity, it kind of like loses out some of the depth of it, some of the real sources. What happens when you actually don't have the energy? And it doesn't matter about taking stuff off your plate, even the slightest thing isn't going to have any kind of like leeway because you don't have the energy to do it. A good example I often use is being so emotionally drained that even picking the socks off the floor is too much of a strategy. And in that mode, what good is productivity tips then? So today we're looking at emotional burnout. And I found that for me anyway, this has been like one of the biggest issues to tackle when it comes to burnout, because when you're emotionally drained, emotionally exhausted, emotionally detached, it can be really difficult to do some of the simplest things. And at this point, it's not about your ability to perform, but some ability to feel anything, or your ability to care. And so, and you start to feel different. You start to feel your personality changing, things like that. And sometimes that needs to be dealt first before we get to the stressor. I sometimes talk about the stress and the stressor. The stress is what's happening within your body, the feeling, the tension, and the stressor is what's causing that stress. So what's happened at work, that conflict you've had with your partner, all those kind of things. Sometimes to deal with the stressor, you need to deal with the stress first, and vice versa. It might be something to do with shame or guilt or doubt or grief. Those kind of things need to be dealt with as well. Otherwise, when it comes prolonged over a long period of time of not dealing with it, that can really affect you, not just about your productivity, but your wellness, your state of mind, your being. And so today we're looking at 5 strategies to help deal with emotional, is specifically about I call it your capacity to feel. Right? So for me, it turns out as I tend to get low capacity to feel. So I become detached and great things happen. I can't feel nothing. I don't feel anything. Terrible things happen. I don't feel anything. On the other side of the scale, you might feel everything. You're intensely in tune to emotions. So everything feels exaggerated, right? And so you're sensitive to everything. So what do you do about that? And today I'm going to look at 5 different strategies. First one is values. One of the things when it comes to burnout is our meaning, applying meaning to things. So, for example, if there's something that it comes up that might seem like a small task, what is the meaning that we're applying to it? Because that might be more of a tell of why it's causing us stress over a prolonged period of time than the action itself. Just doing this work. It's that if I do this work and I do it well, it means I am valuable to the company, which means bada bada ba, which means bada bada ba. And when it comes to that, the reason why we apply meaning a lot of the time is based on our values. What do we consider to be important? So the first strategy is looking at that. What are the things we stand for? What are the things we stand against? And could there be other things that are happening in our lives that are affecting our ability to perform, right? To be present? Is there something that we're in challenge with internally that is happening? Is there something that we're in challenged with externally, in the world? For example, are there things that are happening in your workplace at home which are challenging your values? And that can cause stress over time as well, right? So the question is, what matters to me? Um, and I encourage that because if there's a task or if there's a person, right? And or even if it's me, I'll use that as an example because this is something I found as well. Let's say for example, I am acting not in my best interest and it's going against my value as an individual. I am treating myself in a way that I wouldn't treat someone else. And there's a conflict of interest there. That over time can add the stress to my body and I can feel like I'm in dissonance, right? So my mind is telling me to do one thing and I'm acting in a different way. And that adds stress to me, and that can cause stress over time, and it's important for us to acknowledge that. It's important for us to acknowledge that because we'll be dealing with that internally while we're trying to deal with external things, right? So the question number one is, what matters to you? What are your values? Number two is boundaries. And this is really important. I read a book on boundaries and it changed the way I looked at things. There was a section in it that talked about internal and external boundaries. And I'm going to go a little bit personal here to share a little bit about me and my experience with this. But when it comes to boundaries, an external version is what we usually talk about. External version is what we usually talk about. So, for example, if I'm dealing with somebody, what is it that is happening with them that is going against my boundaries? What is it that they're doing that makes me feel uncomfortable? Whether it's at work with my boss, whether it's my friends, my family, even my partner, my children, what is it that is happening that is not giving me the space to be me, to express, to let it out? Do I have safe spaces, that kind of thing? And you have to protect your boundaries, right? One of the things I found when I was in therapy is I had a great therapist, and he asked me this question: "Is like, what do boundaries look like to you?" And I started to describe things like it's a wall, it's got a fence, and all these kind of things. And he asked me this brilliant question: "It's like, what else could boundaries look like?" And after a while, we workshopped a few things. And for me, it ended up looking like a velvet rope. It's a VIP section. So the boundary isn't a hard standing thing. It's just a representation of what is valuable within that boundary line. And it's not something that forcefully keeps people out, but it's something that protects what's inside. And once I shifted that idea to myself, it completely changed what it looked like to set boundaries. And then I realized, in the same way as how I would manage a club, and I would say to myself, there's a dress code, and it's not that I don't, you know, I still respect you as a person if you are not adhering to the dress code. But if you want to be inside, if you want to come in, you need to adhere to the rules of this club, to this section. And if you don't, you can do your thing out there, and there's no problem with that at all. And that really changed the way I looked at it. So then it became an idea about, what are my boundaries? What do I need to protect? You know? And then when it comes to burnout, a lot of the time is that we're not protecting our boundaries, our values, connected to question number one. If you have a certain boundaries, you're not protecting them and people are walking all over it, that can cause you emotional distress, which can come out in all kinds of different ways. So it's important to set your external boundaries with other people, with your time, with your money, with your energy, with the places you are, with your level of respect. If people are speaking to you a certain way, there's an element of being able to identify them, and that comes with paying attention to what leaves us stressful. Like, oh, actually, I've noticed when I'm with this person, I feel a certain way, or oh, when I feel like I need to step out, when this conflict gets to a certain level and people speak to me this way, something happens internally I don't like. Paying attention to what our body is trying to tell us, and realizing that these are sometimes boundary lines we need to start to set up for ourselves. And then there's enforcing them. What do we do when people cross those boundary lines? How do we protect ourselves? What message are we sending them about how to treat us? And then it goes to the internal boundaries. What is the message that it's telling me? One of the things I found really interesting about relationships is that when we have really deep relationships, it's often built over time with trust. And trust happens when people are given the opportunity to fail, right? So when they're given the opportunity to fail and they don't, then you realize you can rely on them in a certain way. And over time, that becomes a connection, right? And what is the way that we're doing it with ourselves? if I'm telling myself I'm worth certain things and I'm valuable, but I'm allowing people to treat me as if I'm not. Imagine the stress that's happening internally. And that comes with a certain conversation that I need to have with myself. And these are things that I've actually had to go through because I realized, for example, as a giver, and there's all kinds of reasons why I'm a giver, and I know that now through therapy, that things happen which made me overcompensate and feeling like I need to be there for other people to keep the peace and to make people happy and create this space where everyone is okay, because I couldn't do that for certain people when I was younger, right? So, but then it turns out with me being a giver, and then I realized that actually I'm giving all of myself and leaving nothing for me. And so I have to create these boundaries because otherwise I end up burning out. And a lot of people who experience burnout are givers and they have no boundaries. But the problem is when takers don't have boundaries either, right? And they'll easily walk in and out of your space unless you start to set these things. And we often feel afraid because it's like, okay, what happens if I set these boundaries? Will I lose this person? Will they respond a certain way, which is going to put us in a? Will I lose this friend? Will I lose this space? But then the question I had to ask myself is, if me setting boundaries means that I lose this person, was that person ever there for me in the first place? A really good example of that is, I remember, I'm really thankful for the friends I have and I've been able to build these relationships. Is I remember I was meant to meet up with a friend of mine one day, and they knew that my my time has been crazy recently, and they knew how busy I was, but I really wanted to see this person. I value my time with them, etc. But one of the things I hadn't considered is how depleted I already was, and I was giving them out of the dregs of my cup, when really we want to be giving out of the saucer, which is the overflow, right? So I'd been completely depleted, and I'd tell them about this, but we had this catch up coming up. On the day, she canceled on me and she said, listen, um, I consciously booked time with you knowing how busy you are so that I could cancel on you to ensure that you had an evening to yourself. And at first, I was like, what? But I wanted to see you. I wanted to catch up with you and all this kind of stuff. But then when I deeped it, I realized, wow, this person cares about my boundaries and my welfare more than I do, to the point where she would actually go through the effort of booking something with me and then canceling it to just to make sure that I had no excuse, that I had time for myself. And she made me promise, like, don't fill it up with something, which is what I would naturally do. Like I would say, okay, cool. So I've got this time. So let me do let me do work. Let me do this next project. Let me start this business randomly. There's all kinds of stuff I'll end up doing the moment I have free time. And I had to promise her, like, that I wouldn't do that. And that was incredible to me, that someone would do that. But it really taught me about what it meant to protect this, to protect me, and to enforce it. And then it grew into what I call Andre days, like booked time, when I say, okay, I put it in my calendar, this is Andre Day. And Andre Day started off by being um, time where decisions are made based only what Andre wants to do. And that can be that I'm going to do absolutely nothing and feel guilt free, or that I'm going to go and do a spa weekend, or I'm going to just sit there and work on my stuff if necessary, film a video or speak to my mom or my grandma, or this, whatever it might be. I'm going to do what it is that I want to do, and I'm not going to base it off anybody else's needs. And just to give you an idea of how far down this road I would go months without an Andre Day, which is why this cancellation was so necessary. And so, a question for you is, what boundaries do I need to make externally? And what boundaries do I need to make internally? The first question, remember, is what matters to me. And once you understand what matters to you, protect it with boundaries, which is the second strategy. The third strategy is connection. One of the things that I've researched recently is the impact of connection on our mental health and emotional health, our spiritual health. We're not built to be in isolation. And what ends up happening is, when we go through burnout, we tend to withdraw. Um, at- Not everyone, but many of us tend to withdraw. And it's at the time when we need connection the most that we tend to do that. And so the question is, who, what, and where do I need to be? Like, who do I need to be around? Who are the people that I find safe spaces with, that will listen, that will understand, would relate to me, which who I can speak to? Where do I need to be that brings me peace? Like, so for example, for me, I need to be in nature a lot of the times. I need to be outside of this house. I tend to be most at peace around large bodies of water, so sea, rivers. Luckily, I'm living next to the Thames, so there's a beautiful walk there that it tends to calm my nervous system. you know what do I need to be doing that would give me connection? Like, is it, do I need to be giving? Do I need to volunteer? Do I need to, all this kind of stuff? Ask yourself those questions. What, who, and where do I need to be doing? Do I need to be, that is going to help build connection? What connection do I need is actually an even better question. What connection do I need? And it's important to understand that. Do I need to feel connection with myself? Do I need to cry? Do I need to release that? In that sense, we'll come to that in a second. The fourth strategy, right? So the first strategy is values. What matters to me? Second strategy is boundaries. What do I need to protect? Which is usually what you protect, what matters to you. The third strategy is connection. What connection do I need right now? And then the fourth strategy is creativity. And this is where you come with expression. You have built up this emotional, the feelings, the stress, the pressure, the anxiety, all those kind of things, prolonged period of time. How do you express that? Right. And so that can come out in art, it can come out in fun, it can come out in play. And I feel play is so important. People talk about the work-life balance. I call it the work-play balance. For me, putting work at the same level as life is the beginning of the end for me, because it puts work as important as life itself. And for me, work comes under life. Work is a part of life, but so is play. And what ends up happening as we get older is we start to think about all the pressures, all the needs we have. We have dependents, we have children, we have to be there for this person, that person. And play becomes smaller and smaller and smaller part of our lives. And I find as burnout is such an important part of recovery, is adding play as part of our day-to-day strategy, right? Someone I listened to recently. Thanks, Mo, for that. Is this person I listened to recently who said they have alarms on their day, which are play alarms, our fun alarms. So whenever it rings, he has to do something out there just randomly. That could be just run around the block. It could be just jump up and down. It could be play a favorite song. It could be sing. It could be anything at all. But it needs to be something for them that is some kind of like energy shift, to break the pattern that might be happening in the day, and to bring their energy up. And what the next is, they brought it into their work. So they happen to be owning a business, and they implemented that strategy with the company. So company wide, there will be certain times a day where everyone has to do something stupid, right? Just to release, just to let go of that pressure, whatever it might be. Even if you're in the middle of a client meeting, the clients would have to be warned. It's like, look, at half so and so, we're going to do something crazy. So, you need to be in it, right? But it was so important, and the employees were so moved by this, and it was so effective, that those people who left the company kept those strategies as they move forward. And I find it so important to bring that release, that fun, because if everything is serious, you're all like, burnout is just like the obvious door at the end of that tunnel. And unfortunately, that door is not going to lead to light, it's going to lead to darkness. So we need to have that level of fun. We need to have that level of play. Art is a great way of doing that. Paint, sing, dance, play a game, get your friends together and play Monopoly or something like that, paint, pick up a hobby, something where, for me, work is something with an outcome, like a designated outcome. Play is something that doesn't have that. So if I'm painting, it's not because I want to be a painter, it's just because I like to paint, and that's it. And that means that I'm not worried about how good it's going to be or how bad it's going to be, because that itself adds pressure, which can add to your stress, which prolonged can become burnout. So the idea is building things within your day, within your week, within your month, within your year, within your workplace, in your home, in your different community environments, where you can have something that is fun, something that is light, something that is play. And it's not just me saying this is data driven, right? So play is a necessary part of life. And you see it with children. Like if you spend time with kids, you feel release, right? Which is the fifth strategy, right? Is the release. Now, 4 and 5 are a way we could group those together, right? Because creativity is a form of release. But when I say release, I'm really talking about the emotions. And to as there's a book called Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski, and they talk about completing the the stress cycle, completing the stress cycle. And the idea is, if there's an emotion that comes up within you, you need to complete it to be able to move on from it. You need to deal with the stress, the emotion within your body. And what that can look like is, if something stressful happens to you at work and you don't scream, you don't shout, you don't cry, you don't tell someone about it, that builds up over time, because even though you've moved away from the situation, you haven't dealt with the actual feeling, which means that every time you think about it, every time it comes up, it acts as a trigger. And as we all know about triggers, like they can emotionally bring you right back to the very emotions that you haven't dealt with that came from that time. So it's really important for us to deal with the stress itself. And that is what I call release. So cry, laugh, shout. Rage is a genuine feeling. Like if someone has done you wrong, if someone has stepped over your boundaries and disrespected you, which is one of your values, and made you lose connection with the people that you love, and it's gotten to the point where painting isn't going to solve it. Sometimes you need to punch something, right, to let your body know that there's been some kind of release. One thing I used to do is in school, looking back, it's kind of mad, but it made sense. Is I used to put all my pillows up, roll up my duvets and all that kind of stuff, and just punch the thing. Like I would scream, "Ah!" And I needed to let that out. And afterwards, I'll be like fuming. My actual body would just be exhausted, but I would feel so good afterward, feel complete release. And it's the same. It's one of those reasons why you go back to that song that always makes you cry, because there's that tone that the singer sings, which always releases, unlocks something with you. You always go back to that movie that is sad, because right now I need to cry and it's not coming out naturally. So I need something to trigger it into action. But we do that because we need to have that release. One of the other things, actually, which is more of a biological thing, which a lot of people go to, is the hormonal. Like sometimes we need the hormones to be moving within us, right? The positive hormones, and the places where we get it are in different things. Sometimes positive, sometimes not so positive, and it explains why people sometimes go to, like, for example, that glass of wine that you have as a night cap becomes like a bottle of wine. After, when it goes to those kind of things, is because you're looking for something. You're looking for some kind of release. One of the reasons why we eat is because it gives us certain positive hormones, right? So you feel that sugar gives us those hormones that make us feel good in the moment, right? But then the question is, I'm actually looking just to feel good in this moment. So if chocolate, for example, is going to give me that, but I'm going to regret it later, what can I get it from that isn't going to get it, make me feel bad about it later? Do I need to spend more time with someone I haven't spoken to in a long time? Do I need to call that friend who's just going to make me laugh, and feel good that way? Are there other ways to get those hormones moving in a positive way that aren't going to be destructive? Is there release that I need to make? Right. So just going back over those five, number one, and this is all 5 strategies to deal with emotional burnout, right? So number one is looking at what matters to you. What are my values? What are the things that are being challenged right now? Right. Number two is boundaries, is protecting those things that matter to you internally and externally, protecting it from people crossing over my boundaries, but also protecting it from me not adhering to my own boundaries, right? And number three is, what connections do I need right now? Is it with a person? Is it with a place? Is it with a thing? Do I need to feel seen, heard? Do I need to feel validated? Do I need to feel felt? Do I need a hug? You know, absolutely valid need for connection, right? Sometimes intimacy is a really important thing that you might need in the moment, and you might feel like, this is the only way I can get it. Well, explore different ways. If it's just a hug, if you just need someone to hold your hand for a moment, do you need to just be in a space where you can speak to someone and they can give you undivided attention because you're not getting it elsewhere? Number four is creativity. Do you need to go to art, fun, play? Do you need to go to the playground? Do you need to run along the beach? Do you need to, I don't know, find a paint by numbers set and, spend time listening to your favorite music and do like a, drink and paint thing in your house, with your besties? Do you need that? Number five is release. The emotional burden can be heavy. How can I release that? What release do I need right now? And I've done those as questions, right? What matters to me? What boundaries do I need to set? What connection do I need right now? In what way do I need to express, i.e., creativity? And what release do I need? Ask yourself those five questions when you're suffering from emotional burnout. And those questions are specifically designed open endedly because they force your brain to look for an answer. If you ask yourself, do I need release? You could easily say no. That's a closed-ended question. We don't want to do that. What we want to be asking yourself is, what release do I need? And that forces your brain to look for an answer to that question. And we need to go and find it. And then the question is, if you look at yesterday's, is how am I going to get that? Where am I going to get it from? What am I going to do now and when? Right? So I hope this has been helpful to you. That's 5 strategies to help you cope with emotional causes of burnout. I'm going to do another one today because yesterday time was just not timing with me. Okay. So today, later on today, I'm going to do another one of these. And I'm also going to go live on Instagram. So if this is something that you've missed, that you valued, make sure to look on my page. I'm going to save it. And it's also going to save on LinkedIn and YouTube. Thank you very much for your time. Let me know your comments. Let me know what your thoughts. What are the strategies that you use? What are things that help you deal with your emotional burnout? Are you going through it right now? Do you need help? One of the things I offer is like a quick 30-minute call. And I'm going to put the link in the comments here, but then also in my bio on Instagram so that we can just talk about it. There's things I offer in terms of programs and stuff like that as well. But sometimes in that 30 minutes, I can be able to help you give some insight into what might be the block. Sometimes it's a block, right? Sometimes it's not about the task that you have ahead. Sometimes it's actually there's something internally that you need to deal with before you can deal with the task, right? So thank you for your time, and I'll see you later on today.